Hello, everybody. We're about to kick off our first Open Innovation session of CNU 20. The Open Innovation track is new to CNU. It is incorporating short format presentations so we can get a lot of member involvement and some non-member involvement, which is great, into a fairly short time frame. So you're going to see me being a very vigorous timekeeper if anyone goes over, but hopefully we have some well-disciplined presenters and that won't be an issue. But we're really excited to have a good breadth of folks from the transportation world in this session. And I am going to keep my piece of this short so that they have as much time as possible. I do have to let you guys know that this is approved for AIA and AICP credits, 1.25 AIA and 1.25 AICP. So please sign in the back of the room if you are looking for those credits. It being 10:45, Bill, if you're ready. William Lindeke will be our first presenter. And
just the arrows? Oh. I'll just use the arrows. Okay, my name is Bill Lindeke. I am a geography PhD student in the University of Minnesota. I'm also on the St. Paul Planning Commission. I'm going to talk really quickly about some of my dissertation research that's going on right now. It goes without saying, it's a truth universally acknowledged that bicycling is good. It's good for your body. It's good for the economy. It's cheaper for people. It's good for the planet. You don't use any energy. Everyone agrees about this, or it seems like a lot of people agree about this. So there's lots of city plans and city documents. Everywhere you look, there's calls for more bicycling in the United States and Canada. There's lots of kind of think tank reports about how important this is. There's even this survey came out just this week about how everyone agrees that we need more bicycling. This is kind of an overwhelming majority of the people in this one particular poll. Yet, at the same time, in the United States, we have really low rates of cycling overall. Even in the best cities, in the U.S., the 5% is about the rate that we have. I mean, the average for the U.S. is down around 1%, as this graph shows. And even though we've had a big boom lately, the numbers aren't going up as fast as. That's really not satisfying to me if we want to really reach some of the really high goals, the high levels of cycling that you see other places. And it's because even though we have these great plans, when it comes to implementing these actual bike lanes, everyone likes bike lanes in general, but when it comes to a particular project, there's a big battle. And I've seen this all over and again in the Twin Cities. This is from my hometown of St. Paul. This year was very controversial, and all sorts of politicians and neighbors went to the mat to prevent it from going in. So what you end up with is really substandard infrastructure, and this is what it's like to bike in the winter in St. Paul. And a lot of people try to figure out why this is, and they've come up with various ideas, the policy-behavioral gap, the value-action gap. Generally, it's called implementation, and this is where the problem happens for planners and for transportation engineers. So this is kind of where my research has been focused on. These two approaches. One is looking at kind of how the kind of institutions, the advocacy committees, and the planners, and the city, and these people kind of work around trying to get people to bike more. And then the second part of it is to look at cyclists, especially new cyclists, the people that we're trying to attract, and to do interviews with them. And I'll tell you about those in a second. So first, the Twin Cities is one of the best bicycling cities in the United States. We have lots of cyclists, a lot of students. We have a big bike culture. This is a race that happens every January called the Super Bowl, where everyone rides around from different bars on the coldest day of the year. And there's a prize for if you can, I won't tell you all about it. We also have this big federal grant that we got in one of 4 cities in the U.S. to fund new bike infrastructure that will attract new riders. So we have a bike share that got funded partly through that, and all sorts of other sorts of new treatments that have been going on in the city. So this is one part of my research. I'm kind of this guy that you can barely see, and this is a meeting with the cops. I've been doing a lot of sort of attending meetings and taking lots of kind of participant notes. But the second part of my research is to interview new riders, less experienced riders in particular, across a wide range of demographic groups, and to really get at this group that we call interested but concerned cyclists and see what makes them want to ride a bicycle, what makes them afraid to ride a bicycle, what are they thinking about when they're doing this. So this is one of the people that I interviewed, and I'll just tell you a little bit about the kinds of things that I'm discovering. This guy, he's from Nigeria, and so the kinds of chaos that normally would intimidate people, he finds Pales next to Lagos. This is one of the things that I've been doing in these interviews is not just sitting down and talking to people, but to ride along with them with a video camera on my head to really try to capture what the experience of cycling is for them, what the kinds of things that where they go, what kind of, do they ride on the sidewalk or not, what sorts of encounters do they have, and these sorts of things. This is a woman whose her primary concern when she's riding is how other people perceive her. So she's always thinking about the driver that's looking at her while she's stopped at the stop sign. And that's kind of what she told me when I would talk to her about it. This is a woman who really likes to feel good when she's riding around on her bicycle and likes to look good too. She was telling me about how she likes to wear nice skirts and kind of making an impression on people. This is a guy who, while he bikes, I rode with him for about 12 miles at 1 in the morning from his job as a bartender to his house across the city. And he likes to kind of see how long he can go without touching the handlebars. This is a woman who had just picked up bicycling at the age of 50 or so, and she had one of the most interesting details, the kind of thing that this sort of mobilities research method that I'm using, I think really captures in a way that a normal interview wouldn't capture, and that's that she told me about how in this one ride, we were going and it was fall, and she crunched over some acorns that had fallen from the oak tree onto this bike path, and she says, "Oh, that's my favorite thing. I love looking forward to crunching over acorns with my bicycle." So this is the sort of detail that you capture with these sorts of interviews that I think are really hard to get at if you're just thinking about bicycling through an abstract sort of lens. And what the tool that I'm using to think about this is what I call affect. I can't go into it right now, but basically there's two sorts of schools of thought on what affect is. And the first one is this combination of habit and of feeling, how we feel about stuff and how we kind of do it automatically. And the second one is translating that into just capacity for action. So you just develop the ability to ride a bicycle around in the city and it becomes sort of innate for you. And so the question is, how do you go from being someone who's really anxious about riding a bicycle to being someone who can just do it automatically and you kind of develop pleasure through that. And affect is, to me, the lens that's useful for this, as opposed to something like a rational choice model or one where we just make decisions based on kind of economic sorts of ideas or time constraints. Speaking of which. Okay, so here's an example of this, which is that we have an open streets, and you might have heard of this. They're going on all around the world. So when the streets close off, you get all sorts of people riding in all sorts of different ways, little kids. But when the cars are back on the street, you're going to reduce the number of people that you find. So when you see a bike map, all the lines look equal. All these green lines are all bike lanes, right? But they're all different. You get this kind of bike lane versus this kind of bike lane versus this kind of bike lane versus this kind of bike lane, and this is one in West Palm here. And my point of doing this research is, I guess, to figure out how can we develop spaces that allow all these different kinds of affects, all these sorts of emotions and feelings and reasons for riding to kind of all flourish, right? And I guess the lesson is we need to build more cycle paths. That's the short version. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And actually, this is probably a good time to mention, if you have questions for Bill, if you don't mind going outside, just outside the door, so if you have questions, you can ask him. We will not have a formal Q&A at the end of this session because we're trying to pack in as many presentations as we can. Speaking of which, Andy Boenau, that you can correctly pronounce your name.
If he's a celebrity, I'll go by that name. I scripted this so I would not ramble, but where's the...
Eliza?
Yes.
Can I say really quickly?
Yeah.
I'm Lisa Obon with the EPA Smart Growth Office. If you're interested in starting bike sharing in your community, later this year we're putting out an announcement to offer technical assistance to start bike sharing in your community. I have my card. If you want it, I'm happy to give it to you so you can know when the announcement is.
And also, if the any conversation that follows on one of these presentations gets really active, you can take it right next door to the open source room. And they can explain, or the posters over there can explain more what that's about, but it's just next door in K.
All right, make sure I'm looking into this. Go. All right, over the next several minutes, I want to share some thoughts about transportation, but not in the linear engineering format that we're accustomed to seeing. Jane Jacobs famously instructed readers to find illustrations of life by putting down her book and looking around, and that's what I want to do. The types of creature comforts that we have change a lot over time, But people, not so much. We're drawn to population centers, restaurants and drinking places, and we share common pastimes. We don't want to waste our time talking about long trips and short trips and good street design. We want to experience the destination. And we have a real problem. Our culture has allowed designers to focus on the asphalt details instead of the heart of our communities. Humans crave this type of interaction and exchange. These scenes could almost be anywhere, from country girls to city girls. Regular people want to interact. And while we're trying to get to our choice destinations, we've settled for this. This is a view I have too often. We're almost numb to stop-and-go traffic. Having put the car at the center of the universe, it was only natural to add more lanes to pump traffic through our destinations, not to them. We don't have to settle for this. And how do we get into this big mess? Well, when scientists thought that our sun and the planets revolved around the Earth, they had to concoct these complex formulas to predict orbits. And when they realized the planets actually revolved around the sun, the math sort of fell into place. And then in a similar way, when engineers put the car at the center of the universe, it's hard to figure out the relation to commute, schooling, all these other things you see floating around. When you put the person at the center, the design details accommodating the other components sort of fall into place. All right, so the real-life story version. Meet my offspring, Aaron on the left and Drew on the right. I have no idea what occupation they'll choose as adults, but they already have common-sense observations about city streets and city life. On our last big city adventure, the two of them were mocking the drivers who weren't having fun walking. So regardless of age, what do people see in their mind's eye? What's the love story for the place that you call home? I'm going to use this sidewalk as a canvas to show you everyday examples that might resonate with your city, your small town, or your suburbs. Not everyone on a bike is a bike commuter. We just heard a little bit about that. With all the propaganda around us about cars owning the streets, we forget that riding a bike is fun. It's a fun way to get to the corner cafe. It's a fun way to experience a great historical street like Monument Avenue here in Richmond. If the city or the town you have has a railroad, you might have a historic train station like this one or some other local feature. But I'm going to guess that when you take friends to go visit that train station or any other fun destination, you want to experience it on your own 2 feet, not from a superhighway that bisects the area. If these images were in a transportation engineering magazine, they aren't. The caption would be something like, heavily congested corridor with unacceptable average delay per person causes failing levels of service. This is my job, I know. But these types of gatherings are what people choose to be transported to. A lot can happen in the public realm. You can use it to construct more traffic lanes or let it be an inviting place for people to hang out and spend some money. And I can say as a traffic guy, with access to chalk and mobility on the sidewalk, I can tell you that Drew experienced an acceptable level of service. Businesses, large and small, wins with good, competent street design. When you have various paths to choose from, entire streets can be closed for periods of time. It doesn't harm the community. Vendors might like the visibility of car traffic, but it's foot traffic that's spending the money. Segway tours are getting more popular across the country. These people here in the photo are riding through an old canal that was actually originally surveyed by George Washington. You can't experience that from that same super highway that's elevated over the city. You can't go a high-speed car tour and experience all of that. And these are just other images of why people love their city. Using humans as the design vehicle for city and suburban streets isn't just a feel-good academic concept. We like walking. If walking is made preferable through design, we find more areas about our community to love. You can discover that little wayside to read a book during lunch. So all's lost, right? Imagine if private corporations owned and operated roads like this that were dangerous and created asphalt wastelands. For 2 hours a day, traffic is congested, and the rest of the day looks like this. No vibrancy or sense of life. Why are we tolerating this? We've been conned into a love affair with car-scale design. Regular people want human-scale design. The people here showed up to celebrate an international bike race coming to Richmond in 2015. This type of thing hits a nerve with people. They get excited. This is not for a road widening project that you see turnout like that. And speaking of excitement, I don't know why these women are so grumpy, because like I told you, I'm a transportation professional. I'm fully equipped to say that this road provides a very acceptable level of service. But they know better. They're suffering even without inclement weather. So I won't leave you on a downer. There is hope. People are starting to realize common sense suggests highways should look very different from their local streets. The lawn signs on this street read, "Save our street." That's the SOS that you can barely see. Or more accurately, "Save our lives." So is victory in our sights? I'm optimistic. Big deal players like the U.S. Department of Transportation, ITE, and AASHTO are all endorsing good common sense in terms of street use and design. That has to be a sign of the apocalypse, right? I'm going to call that victory.
Thank you so much, Andy. And Andy will be outside to take questions. Next up, we have John Moore and Jane Lim Yap.
Wow. A lot of you out there. Hey, my name is John Moore, and I'm with the Florida Department of Transportation. I know what you're thinking. Who in the world invited DOT? You know? Why is he here? Well, I think I have something new to share with you. And no, it's not a new color yellow to go to stripe our roads. You see, it's a change in the way we address multimodal transportation. See, we are no longer your grandfather's DOT. In days of old, we would four-lane your roadway. That's easy for us. We can do that in our sleep, literally, because we work construction overnight while I'm in bed sleep. But let me share with you where we have been and where we are going. Throughout history, transportation professionals have played essential roles in defining points in our nation's building. In the 19th century, we literally crossed the continent with building the transcontinental railway linking east and west coasts. The railway is considered one of the greatest American technological advances in the 19th century. 100 years later, President Eisenhower initiated the interstate highway system, which would enable full vehicular mobility for Americans. And the program was successful. This was one of the largest public works projects in history, crossing our continent with nearly 50,000 miles of roadway. The U.S. now boasts one of the largest networks of freeways in the world. Today we are again faced with a new challenge brought about by a new set of contextual issues. Here's where the challenge begins. See, for about 40 years there have been state agencies called DOTs. Originally state highway departments that were merged with either aviation, ports, transit, or railway departments. The reality is, even with the name change, we have been the state highway department up to the present. What has inspired us to start changing? Well, available resources for one. Now, this chart shows the actual and projected highway trust fund receipts. For both highway and transit account, the trend is a diminishing reserve for funding. As a result, we have invested less and less in our roadway infrastructure. Our peak, as you can see there, for the year 2000 shows that we spend 0.36% of our gross domestic product on highways. Compare that to China, which spends 5% of its gross domestic product on transportation infrastructure. The cumulative national shortfall for transportation funding to keep pace with projected needs has been estimated at $1 trillion through the year 2015. Florida faces similar shortfalls. big numbers of backlog. In fact, the backlog is $50 billion through the year 2031. Another reason is safety. American cities are ranked among the worst in pedestrian fatalities when compared to other countries. This wheel represents pedestrian fatalities for major cities in the world. Each pair of shoes represents one pedestrian death per 100,000 residents. The U.S. cities are all in the outer three rings. Now, in Florida here, we like to brag about having 3 highly ranked universities in collegiate sports. But when it comes to pedestrian safety, Florida has 4 metro areas ranked among the most dangerous in the country for pedestrians. So the number 1 ranking and the number 2 ranking, Orlando has the number 1 ranking for pedestrian fatalities, and Tampa has number 2. Those aren't number 1 and number 2 rankings that anybody can be proud of. We are also seeing a significant decrease in the cost of driving, increase in the cost of driving. Automobile reliance is becoming too costly for many. Gas prices are again at record high levels, partly because of how our land use patterns have developed. Families are spending close to 1/5 of their income on transportation. We can no longer expect every family to own multiple vehicles, as in the case of many in our communities today. Throughout the country, households are beginning to change their lifestyles in response to rising gas prices. The last decade showed a dramatic drop in the number of young drivers, 23%, as you can see there. This chart shows how vehicle miles traveled have, for the first time in history, started a downward trend since 2008, when gas prices reached its first peak in recent years. You know, there's more awareness today of those who may not be able to or choose not to drive. According to statistics, 1 in 3 Americans do not drive. This group made up of 1 out of 5 older Americans, those under 16, and those who cannot afford to own or drive a vehicle. Demographic trends tell us that this group of people will be increasing, and we need to be ready to cater to their transportation need. By 2025, the number of people over the age of 65 will reach about 62 million, representing 18% of our population. The lack of opportunities to take transit, to bike safely, and to walk safely makes travel to the store, the doctor, or a visit to family and friends impossible. Because of all of these factors, our partner agencies have started refocusing their priorities and are asking the DOT for different things. Here's an example of requests that we are receiving. Now, this happens to be a priority list from Metro Plan Orlando, the MPO for the Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County area. 23 of 40 projects requested are either predominantly multimodal or include some multimodal elements. Our conventional approach to transportation planning, land use happens, it generates travel and demands roadway capacity. Now, how is land use integrated in this process? Future land use is anticipated, traffic is forecasted, and the future investments are expected to accommodate the demand. So how can we do this differently? Well, can transportation investments be multimodal? Can they help manage traffic or travel and be coordinated with land use? Well, multimodal facilities need to be planned along with land use. They need to address the demand for walking, cycling, and transit, as well as driving. Here's what we are developing to address these demands. In Florida Department of Transportation, we have what's called a Plans Preparation Manual, which includes a chapter that's entitled Transportation Design for Livable Communities. That chapter tells us that prior to being able to apply these guidelines, we need involvement of the right stakeholders and incorporation of the chapter's intent during the planning and project development processes. The problem is, no one wrote a corresponding planning chapter yet, and that's where we're at. So the basic formula for transportation planning starts with asking the right questions, not simply asking our partners, what projects do you want? Because usually those come out and say, widen something. And that's what we've been doing for the last 30 or 40 years. But we want to determine what problems do we have first, and then what opportunities do we have, and how can we work with our stakeholders to make our communities more competitive and sustainable. So here's a quick example of a DOT-led planning study that we recently completed. It's State Road 50, a multimodal corridor study in the city of Claremont, south of Lake County in Florida. Briefly, here's the process that we used for this study. Beginning from the rationale for the study, determining the challenge at hand. We obtained a detailed understanding of the problem. We did so through stakeholder interviews, mapping and analysis, and fieldwork, traffic modeling and analysis. Developed guiding principles through a planning charrette that will be used to develop and evaluate future corridor scenarios. Then we prepared a corridor action plan. So that's the type of, totally different than the way that we are doing things today. And those are the ways that we really look to see the interests of our stakeholders, what do they really want, and how can we deliver it. And we have, and we are developing ways to deliver these that's totally not in accord to the trend as we have it now. Thank you.
Sorry, just wanted to give you a quick context of that corridor study that John had talked about. The corridor study, as John mentioned, is on a state road. It's an arterial road. Recently got widened to 6 lanes, but even with the widening, the forecast traffic levels, if the patterns of land uses would remain the same, would actually be used up even before the widening is completed. And so this is what it looks like. The corridor is State Road 50. The pattern is pretty suburban in nature. And just a little bit more context about it. This is State Road 50, downtown Claremont, which is a small historic community west of, on the western end of the corridor. Is there, but 30 years ago, along State Road 50 are all rural citrus orchards. So the suburbanization didn't happen that fast or that long ago. This is 1999, fast forward, all the orchards are gone. There were a couple of freezes that happened in there, but this is 2010. So it's dramatic suburbanization that happened that really caused the issues that State Road 50 is handling. So State Road 50 transformed from a commuting regional corridor to one that has to accommodate both local and regional traffic. And within the state roadway, that how it's designed, it was really tough for that corridor to handle it. And really, just zooming out a little bit more, John mentioned that it is west of downtown Orlando. So downtown Orlando is here. This is Claremont, the small town, all the citrus farms. What really changed its use and function is not only because of this suburbanizing pattern. So Claremont transformed into a bedroom community, but also the regional roadways that happened. This is the Florida Turnpike, State Road 408 that connects downtown Orlando to this site, changed what is needed for State Road 50. So the function of the road and the road itself supporting the community changed. So this is it, again, in context quickly. So John mentioned that we looked at traffic. And so this notion that this is a commute corridor and only regional traffic going to Orlando is using it, we were surprised partially to realize that, this is no longer the case. More than 50% of the traffic on a state roadway designed to accommodate regional traffic is actually local serving traffic. They start within the corridor and end within the corridor. So they are the trips that are actually 3 miles or less that could be done with another mode if the facilities for that other mode is there and the land uses are set up right. So again, why does this happen? This is downtown Claremont's street network. This is the network east of downtown, east of Claremont. This is what happened in the last 30 years. So again, which one of this network would allow for the multimodal travel that we keep talking about? As John mentioned, we touched, we're serious about engaging the local land use partners in this exercise. We did hands-on interactive charrette sessions, understanding what the issues are. It came out not just from the data that we were looking at, that local traffic is the more important one to solve, but also from the stakeholders' input themselves. Developed some guiding principles. I'd like to call your attention to the fifth one that the stakeholders told us: turn the car around. So we really don't want to be a bedroom community to Orlando anymore. We want to be a complete place within our corridor, within our community, and we don't want to drive out of the corridor. So we were communicating with municipal leaders, with business owners, with property owners through this workshop and through this study. And we wanted to make sure that we develop concepts that speak to them. And these two concept plans happen to be a demonstration site along State Road 50. It's a greenfield site that had a planned development of regional impact. It's a DRI. It's 30 acres of property. And when we started out the project, they said, well, we are really serious about multimodal. We designated our corridor a multimodal corridor from a policy perspective. Is that enough? Well, multimodal requires that land use, which John talked a lot about. So this first scenario shows one land use pattern, your typical suburban pattern with the big boxes, sea of parking, a residential development disjointed from it. And this second scenario shows some of the same uses, some of the commercial uses, and other types of residential uses, a mix of residential uses laid out in a different pattern that allows for that multimodal mobility that they would want to happen on these two schemes, State Road 50, this blue line at the bottom. So, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but these land use is really part of the picture when you talk about multimodal mobility. And again, in terms of transit, it also speaks to how you can actually provide effective transit service, having the transit provide direct service to where the land uses are. And as engineers, we really want to drill down to a quantifiable number and prove to our decision makers that this makes sense, that the second scenario would provide an option that would be more sustainable and achieves what the stakeholders would want. So we developed performance measures that tie back to those guiding principles, the 5 guiding principles that we talked about. So we'll link the goals to the performance measures. So some of these performance measures are the length of streets with pedestrian and bicycling facilities, the number of employees that each one of those scenarios would serve, the housing units, and the types of employment also in the second scenario would be more diverse than the first one. So the first one would be more retail, one type of employment. And then also we looked at trip generation. So what would be the number of trips generated by the second scenario compared to the first scenario? The second one actually generate 5 times the peak number of traffic, 5 times the peak number of traffic compared to the first scenario. And they all happen at the same time because it's one type of trip. It's going to shopping. It also doesn't provide that internal capture, as we call it in engineering terms, of allowing trips to happen internally within that development. So just going back to this for a second, so, person going to a restaurant down in this main street could use some of these internal network to get there, and perhaps even bike or walk there. Whereas in this scenario, you have to go back out to the main road, to State Road 50, and use up that capacity, which is what's happening currently. And then just the other measures, the area of publicly accessible park spaces, one of those is a key difference also, is this park space here, well, it's not a park space, this water retention area would probably be fenced in. It's not accessible. This is a drive aisle on the backside. Whereas here, it's fully incorporated into the development. It could be an amenity to the development, and it's accessible to the community. So here are just some images of what that might look like, and we shared this with the elected officials and the community leaders, and really speak to them. Claremont, as you know, it's a small town, and the densities are important. They want to see what kind of development we're really talking about, how transit could be incorporated, and developing a complete system of streets that serves local traffic as well as regional traffic at the same time. And then one more point is that this is borrowing from one of our own. This is Peter Katz's work in Sarasota County. The DOT is recognized that transportation investments yield economic development, but specific transportation investments yield different types of economic development. And as you can see, from an undeveloped piece of property yielding $3 per acre of tax return to some of those retail development that we see in the first scenario yielding about $20,000 per acre, and mixed use high-rise yielding $803,000 per acre. The DOT is speaking this language and is understanding this. And it takes a lot of partnership to do this. So obviously, scenario B is a lot more modest than what this is showing. But what this means is that this yields the same amount of economic return as these two. But these two uses up a lot of our resources. So DOT really, doesn't want to be in that mindset if the community really doesn't want that. But we really need to know what the community wants. The DOT takes cue from the community in providing the transportation service, or helping with that. This is a map of one of the residential development. This is State Road 50 again. This is a promotional material that they give out for a development called Heritage Hills. And the cue here is that, come live here. Look how easy it is to get out of here. And, if that's the cue that we're giving to the DOT, yes, we'll build all your roads to get you out of there. But this is another set of images that we could provide the DOT. And these are the images locally to that area in Claremont, all the things that are special to them. And as a partner in DOT, we can't do this alone, and we'd like for the local partners and all of us here at CNU to help in this new set of skills and expertise that the DOT would be needing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane and John. And if you guys if you can get outside to answer questions, and feel free to come back in if people will let you. Next up, George Proakis. And let's see if I can help you get your presentation up fast. Shouldn't have hit save. Sorry, George.
No, that's okay.
Okay. Let me get some of these out of the way. And there you go.
All right, thanks, Josh. Thank you very much for being here. Very full room today. For those who know me, there are two things I like to do in presentations. The first thing is I like to talk too much and too long, and the second thing is I like to talk about codes. So I'm going to do neither of those today. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about codes. But given the opportunity to talk about what's going on in Somerville, Massachusetts, a place doing a lot with transit-oriented development in a speech of under 7 minutes, I decided to see if I could share 6 things I learned about transit-oriented development for Somerville in 6 minutes. So Somerville, for a little bit of background, is about a 4 square mile city, the densest in New England, just north of Cambridge, Massachusetts, just deep into the greater Boston area. People say it's a city of squares. It's a lot of sort of connected together grids resulting in these little commercial squares all over the place. And Somerville presents a really interesting area to study transit-oriented development because a lot is going on there and a lot is changing. And one of the most significant things that's changing is we're getting new rail transit. And I'm glad, by the way, I'm not the first person here to put my own kid into a PowerPoint picture today. But anyway, what's happening in Somerville is a major change with a new Orange Line station at Assembly Square allowing for mixed-use development, and the Green Line that basically runs through Boston into Cambridge and ends, we'll be getting new stops that run through the center of Somerville, that when all of this is done in about 2019, we'll be in a position where we'll have gone from having 15% to 85% of the city's population within a half-mile walk of transit. So the thing that I've learned, first of all, deals with our comprehensive plan, the Summer Vision comprehensive plan that we just finished. Comprehensive planning need not be boring, and it actually can be really helpful to not only shape the center of a community, but to keep us a little edgy and make sure we know what we're doing. And a lot of communities in Massachusetts don't even do comprehensive planning because not many people make us do it. But at the same time, we realized that with all this change coming, we needed to know where we were going. We needed to have a accessible, reasonable, easy to understand vision, a list of our values about diversity and community, a list of what's important to us in a community that generally is filled with 2- and 3-family houses on very small lots, a community that is well known for the fact that Cambridge seems to get all the economic development and we get all the 3-family houses, but that we could actually do some change with this transit while still protecting our neighborhoods, find an opportunity for 30,000 new jobs and 6,000 housing units, and do it mainly in areas around the transit stations while preserving our neighborhoods at the same time, and explain it all through a plan that actually has language that's accessible enough for people to understand what's going on. So we finished that, and we've looked more into what's going on with our stations. We've had one that's been running ahead of all that process at Assembly Square, so far ahead that they've been working on it for about 20 years, which has led me to the lesson that good urbanism is worth the wait. And sometimes it's a very long wait, because a half a generation ago, people wanted to put strip malls up here with the train running by, and we pushed to get transit, and we pushed to get access, and we got the opportunity to build a mixed-use development here, and hopefully someday even get rid of the rest of the strip malls and build more mixed-use development here, and really change the nature of a place. And as the process of doing that, we've also been able to, even without a form-based code, push a developer into giving us a design standard that is resulting in new construction of new activity around a transit station that's actually being built. So the third thing I've learned, and this relates a lot to our Union Square neighborhood, which is really Somerville's own little downtown, is that great TOD requires more than great transit, it requires great streets. And the problem with Union Square, and there's our station, which is just outside of Union Square where it's going to be built, and Union Square is the area in the blue that's kind of in the middle, and the station you can see is a little off to the edge, and we have this one-way pair of sort of streets that speed people in and out of Cambridge that kind of run around us. And we want to bring back the quality of everything that we could do around our center, and there's a lot of excitement around Union Square, although we do have parking lots fronting some of our best restaurants, although our restaurant owners want to put pop-up cafes there, so I like that. But we've really looked at, and although we don't necessarily have the answer yet, options like this to expand the side of our plazas, change one-ways back into two-ways, reclaim our roads for ourselves, and make sure that when we sponsor transit-oriented development here, it can happen in a format that works for us. The fourth lesson we've learned is that there are times when we just need to let go. Let go of our antiquated 250-page, 275-view zoning ordinance. See, I said I was going to talk about codes. That has been a problem in allowing certain types of areas to redevelop. So where we have a station coming in that is right next to an area that has mainly been a mix of industrial and an occasional arts use, the Brick Bottom area that's right next to this Washington Street station, which is kind of just down below it where it's all red, and it's all mainly, there's a trash transfer station and a number of other real high-quality uses here, where we're expecting some real change. That what we started talking about is the idea of this being the one place in Somerville where maybe we'll actually allow someone to build a by-right project and actually create form-based code that can allow us the opportunity to allow some creativity. And what we have realized as we've done visioning there is you can do some really creative things, and this is even just a minor street change to the area. But if we can code this, we can do something really cool, and that we can sort of open up innovation in one place in such a way that it will allow some things to work for us that you can't really do in the middle of Somerville's neighborhoods. The fifth thing we've learned is that while New Englanders are very suspicious of anybody coming in from out of town and telling them what to do, that we can adapt everything that we've learned about charrettes and use it to our own advantage. So with a number of our stations that are in the middle of our neighborhoods, that are really in the core of our residential areas, we're engaging in a process this fall where we're basically taking everything about the charrette and sort of unpacking it. We're still doing a planning process that's a couple of weeks, a couple of months long rather than a couple of days, but we're including all of the feedback loops, all of the general strategies of a charrette, a couple of design sessions packaged almost back to back. And what we've basically done is unpack the charrette concept to make sure that people here feel comfortable that what we're doing in the future is something that reflects and works with their past, and that will allow maybe a neighborhood town center like this to change a little bit with the transit coming, but wouldn't radically change their world in such a way that they wouldn't be comfortable with that difference. And we're going to do it through design, and because we're fixing our code, we're going to make sure to code that as well, although I'm not sure I'll be able to get it quite as open as the area where we have been working before, talking about before in Brick Bottom. My sixth lesson is actually really simple, which is that the Sustainable Communities Program at HUD has been the most helpful thing that has ever happened to us. It has helped us fund our programs in dealing with station area planning. It is helping us fund our comprehensive plan. It is making us possible to be able to do a whole lot of work on changing our zoning and opening up conversations that we in a small city planning office would not be able to do under those circumstances without it. So with those 6 lessons, I hope you've learned a little bit about Somerville today, and I will be out back to answer any questions anybody may have. Thanks.
Thank you, George. And next up, we have Kevin Klinkenberg. Kevin Klinkenberg. Sorry, Kevin.
It's all right. She forgot who I was earlier today, too. Welcome to the basement of the CNU. I feel like this is the basement sessions. We should probably clear out all the chairs and do couches and what's this? Oh, there. Thank you. Put couches and bean bags in and make this a little more comfortable for everybody. I'm an architect and an urban designer by training, which of course means that I'm not going to talk about architecture or urban design at all. I'm going to talk about transit today, especially the bus. I want to talk a little bit about the bus, the sort of Rodney Dangerfield of transit in America. And why am I interested in the bus? Well, for a lot of reasons. Number one, because every time I try to ride one, it just seems like a very frustrating experience. But more fundamentally, because there are about 1,000 bus systems in the United States. We talk an awful lot about rail and give an awful lot of airtime to rail for really only about 70 systems that exist around the country today. The other reason that is critically important to think about is that we do an awful lot of TOD planning in the new urbanism. We have all sorts of plans where we talk about transit, how people, where it can be and what it could look like. But we talk very little about the actual operation of transit and the actual usage of it on a day-to-day basis. We do seem to talk a lot about streetcars as well, and I love streetcars. Streetcars are wonderful. I think we have this kind of fantasy that we're going to return to these days of the sort of maps that we see up here, where we're going to have ubiquitous streetcar systems in every big city in the country, and color me a skeptic on that. In the meantime, we have a bus system that exists in most cities that a lot of times have views that look a lot like this. We have these large buses that sort of crisscross our towns and our cities, and they're empty an awful lot of the time. And it seems like we ought to be thinking more about the operation and how to get butts in seats so that this becomes a worthwhile investment. In one example, this was in Kansas City where I lived for 17 years. I wanted to get a little bit of a grip one time on a handle. We get excited about the brief, sort of the modest increase we've had in ridership in the last 10 years, but from a historical perspective, it's dramatically lower than what we were even 100 years ago with far fewer people. Now, this is supposed to be a video, but it's not working for me. At any rate, part of the reason, obviously, is that the experience of riding the bus itself is really not all that great. And for the most part, it's actually pretty lousy. And one of those reasons that video would have illustrated is sort of the time that it takes just to pay and get on and off the bus by paying. I wanted to take a little bit of a look at PalmTran as sort of a theory of what would happen if we got rid of the payment, if you simply had no payment at all on the bus system. What if it was free? Now, a lot of systems will operate, they'll operate fixed routes that will get about 10 to 20% of their fare box recovery on those fixed route systems. But if you actually look at the entire system, this is PalmTran's budget, only 8% of their entire revenue comes from fare. And so we think to ourselves, well, why can't we just eliminate that? What happens if you just don't have fare revenue at all in the entire system and people can essentially ride for free? Now, many systems already today do free lines or have free services of a variety of kinds. A lot of cities will have free days. They'll have free days when it's bad air quality days. They'll have certain shuttles that are free, downtown shuttles. Savannah, Georgia, where I am now, actually has 3 separate shuttle or essentially downtown free lines that operate throughout the historic district. So a lot of agencies are already giving the service away in certain conditions and locations. And my proposition is, why not look at this from a system-wide perspective? There actually are a few places that have completely free service. This one's in Canada, Whidbey Island, which is a small island off Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. A lot of ski towns, Vail and other places, have entirely free transit systems, and they're actually very well used and very well liked. And so this is the question then: what happens? If we were to propose this idea of getting rid of fares, how do you replace the revenue? And my proposition here is we can look at both top and bottom line perspectives. First of all, there is a capital cost to the actual systems that it takes to take in the money. But there are any number of ways that agencies can look at completely sort of transforming their business operations, and in some ways looking at it like the dreaded airlines. What happens if all of the little enhanced services that you could offer you actually pay for? Getting on and off the bus and riding on the route is free, but there are any number of other things that we could charge for. This is an actual bus line in Ottawa, Canada, believe it or not. This is a premium service they're offering in Ottawa where you can pay an extra fee and you ride a bus that looks like this. But, and it's kind of a funny thing. You look at it and think this must be a joke. But the point is, we should be looking at a whole variety of sort of enhanced and premium services that we could use to supplement perhaps the fare that's lost, the revenue that's lost from the basic fare itself being free. This concept is really simple. It's known as variable pricing. Anybody who's in business understands that you have a variety of price points for whatever sort of service it is that you're going to offer, whether you're attending a sporting event, a concert. In these cases, you pay very little or nothing, and sometimes to sit on the grass. If you want a good seat up front, you pay a lot more. And unfortunately, most of our bus agencies have sort of a single price, no matter what the service is. And so this proposition is to say, let's take a different look at that. Why not have that basic service, the basic circulators that crisscross our cities, be free, and then charge $3, $4, $5 for services like True BRT or premium routes of other kinds, or perhaps you pay a little more for a really good seat on the bus. If there are ways that can be done that would actually provide some creativity in the service, these are some examples. Actually, the bus I showed you with the dining cars in it, that is on the top left. But there are some really fascinating ways that we could use buses beyond what we typically think about. And what are the benefits of doing this? Well, from a very simple perspective, more riders is a good thing. More people on the system is a good thing. More riders actually would leverage investments at the transit stops themselves. It enhances the viability of TOD, which actually enhances the tax base and many other benefits as well. So that's all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And if you would like to get in touch with any of the speakers and you aren't able to do that today, you can email innovation@cnu.org, and I will make sure that you get in touch with that speaker. Next up, we have our final group of the day is a team, and consisting of, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, why not? Thank you. Thank you. I'm Ann McIlroy, and I'm here with Jessica Hawes with our firm, and David Shijeki with Metrolinx, who are an agency of the Ontario government charged with the mission of revitalizing and improving transit on a regional basis. And we're going to present today 3 case studies in the City of Toronto. I'm going to talk about Dundas Station in one of Toronto's better and greener and more successful neighborhoods near High Park, for those of you who know the City of Toronto. Jessica's going to talk about Kennedy Station, which is in an area of Toronto which is transforming. It's more of a suburban location, and then David will speak about Weston Station. But we're going to talk about station design, which is a very common thread in terms of a theme that's coming out today: mobility and refining mobility. Porter Airlines motto for their airline is flying refined. I think this idea of travel refined in general is something that we're all touching on, particularly Kevin in his last presentation today. So how can we refine this travel and think about these stations as places that are civilized, comfortable, visible, and attract us to them? I want to just touch on a bit of a story on the Dundas, Bloor-Dundas Mobility Hub and its station transformation. We were very fortunate in this project to actually work with the community prior to the station design. So we had the opportunity to actually conduct what is referred to as a Dundas Avenue study, which is basically a study that looked at transforming their main street, two main streets actually in close proximity to two transit stations. So we met with the community through a year and developed a mid-rise building typology for those streets, which would allow all the existing fabric to remain on the street, but would allow for the kind of intensification that they felt comfortable with based on the look and form and right-of-way of the street, which was basically a one-to-one building ratio. And the outcome of that was something that the residents and the business owners were very much tied to. It was their vision, it was their plan. The city then undertook to prepare a zoning bylaw, which was very important because it reflected exactly what the outcomes of the Avenue study were. And the residents and the business owners became stewards for that bylaw. They actually helped write portions of it, which was very timely because at that time, this was one of the key developments that was going forward at the time, the Giraffe, a 27-story building, which was on a tiny site. Given that it was near the transit station, the developers felt that this was an appropriate development, but the residents did not. So there was fuel to combat this development, and it was refused at our planning court at the OMB. Then the following year, we had the opportunity to begin the Mobility Hub study. And the Mobility Hub had quite a number of components and areas, and I'm going to focus on the station design itself. But suffice it to say that it was a good news story for this community because we had actually developed a strategy for their building form and the fabric around the neighborhood. It took us into the whole fabric of the streets. And this is what stations are. This is what mobility is. It's not just the platform that you get onto or the turnstiles that you go through to get onto the bus or the streetcar or the subway. It's really about the fabric that takes you there and the edges of the building and the human scale that affords as you get there. And then, of course, when we got into developing the station design itself, you'll see when I show you the existing images, we were trying to create something that was very specific, that was lean, that was green, brought in natural daylight, made people feel welcome, and a little bit like the Apple Pavilion Midtown in New York, a glass pavilion that takes you to the underground of that large civic plaza, thinking about how you can take passengers to the subway underground and up to the tracks that would be attractive, well-lit, safe feeling, and well-protected. And giving you that feeling once you get in there where you are, orienting to your place and the destinations that you are there to undertake to depart to. So some of the existing conditions, you can see the area and the rail corridors they're running through, a lot of large format industrial buildings, large format retail in the area, but then this marvelous context of older neighborhoods on leafy green streets. The mobility hubs themselves do look at a variety of zones, the primary, secondary, and tertiary zones, which are in terms of the primary, based on a real sense of walkability and what's immediately in the vicinity and what belongs there. And you can see the location of High Park nearby. And in the secondary zones, those are the areas where people are actually traveling to the stations from in a very walkable manner. So as I mentioned, we addressed through the Avenue study a number of areas throughout the community in a mid-rise building fabric. And this was determined to be about 6 to 8 stories, depending where it was. As of right would be 6 stories because that was a building height that people felt that through the width and depth of blocks that were buildable, this was about the right form, that we could get a tremendous amount of density happening in one location. But I take you to the station. And as we look at the existing tracks that go over the underpass, we begin to see what the station is like right now. And this is what we were asking people to do, and have up until this point been asking people to do, to go underneath this dank underpass and find their way to the station platform above, and to go into this tiny little dark hole and find themselves to the platform above. So a simple intervention of just pushing back the abutment of the underpass and of bringing people into the station through a connected walkway, a widened sidewalk, places where you can park bicycles, buy a ticket in the station, have visibility of where you're going, and get that information. And then interconnect through a system that would take you to the subway underground as well. But the key thing about the station is that it would be welcoming, that even at this stage of conceptual design, that we actually create an image and a vision for the station that the community buys into, that they're part of designing, and that they like the look of. It becomes that icon for travel refined that begins to set the standard for what you will find everywhere else on the way on your route. The canopy becomes the key element. It is visible from a distance, or it will be when it's built. It protrudes across the sidewalk, it lets light in, and it makes people feel oriented and welcome. And then when you get into the interior, you actually have the opportunity to, in fact, in this interior, buy a ticket, park your bike, store things in lockers if you want to leave them behind for the day, and find out where you're going. And then come back out at the end of your journey to the sidewalk and this dank underpass that we saw before, and be oriented beyond to the city and the fabric of the neighborhood that lies around. And I'll pass it on next to Jessica to talk about the Kennedy Station.
Thanks, Anne. So a very different context than Anne's presented in her presentation, and also a very different stage of study that we're looking at for this mobility hub. The Kennedy Station is actually a study that's underway, but it provides a very interesting context in terms of the more suburban nature of the community that we're dealing with, and really deals a lot with the uplift potential for this area and making sure that urban development can happen in a way that's cohesive with the transportation planning. Just in terms of the high-level principles in terms of a mobility hub, generally these studies have, and we're very lucky that Metrolinx has already prepared a series of very detailed guidelines about the process of determining a mobility hub, but also the process of studying them. And so that process, a lot of it is to do with working with the community, working with stakeholders, and also working with Metrolinx themselves. So first, like all good planning exercises, it starts with guiding principles. It starts with working with the community to determine what they would like to see happen in their area. How will the mobility hub affect this area? This mobility hub is very different because there's a new transportation line that's coming in that's supplementing the existing lines that are already there today. So there is really an impact of change that can occur. And then most importantly, as an urban designer, what will this mobility hub look like, and how will it improve the existing area? As Anne mentioned, all mobility hubs are looked at from a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary zone. The primary zone, you can see the TTC and the GO transit, which is the rail, and the subway connections within that area, and it's really the area of focus. The secondary zones, framing along Eglinton, which is the main street, are really about redevelopment potential. And then the tertiary zone is really your stable residential neighborhoods and the people you want to connect to and bring into the station. To give you a little bit of the challenges we have associated with this study, Eglinton Avenue, you can see it bridging over, and a lot of the station is located below it. So it's very disconnected. It's a really challenging area to really tie the community together and to create a walkable, pedestrian-oriented and cycling-oriented area. There's also a significant amount of existing large format retail, which we really see in the mid to long term as transitioning into a new character. But all of that is dependent on getting the station area right and making sure that you have the right catalyst projects that are going to go forward early that really encourage that redevelopment to occur. You can see the mix of residential, a lot of single family, and then a variety of buildings set quite significantly back from the street. in the center areas along that main strip of Eglinton, which is the center road moving east to west. We also have the challenge of significant barriers. With transportation comes these types of elements that are difficult to navigate. The rail shown in the dark black line, dashed line, the bridge in the solid black box, but also we have the added element of a hydrocorridor in this area, which does create a no-build zone. So there is a lot of challenges associated with it. There's already a lot of open space, but you can see there's a big hole in the center of where the station area would be and where we would be targeting area for redevelopment. And then most importantly, working, as I said, with the community to determine what the character of Eglinton Avenue will be, to make sure that people are comfortable walking to and into the station. One of the single things that we learned in this process very early on is nobody walks into the station. Everybody takes a bus from a block away or 2 blocks away or 3 blocks away. So this study is really about how we can change that. Also early on, when we look at development potential seen in the blue, you can see that there is a lot of opportunity for redevelopment along this area, and this is really a process that can completely change what is happening there today. But getting that station area right is the most important component. This is the station area itself. You can see it's a suburban station. The long box is the subway interface. There's also a significant number of buses that come here as well. And then you can also see the SRT line, which is a ground rail transit that comes into this area as well. Soon it'll also have added to it in the blue line is the Eglinton Crosstown, which is a complete east-west connection north of the city center that is going to connect from east to west. You can also see from this drawing that those transportation connections are significant in this area, and they have a significant impact on the buildability of the areas directly adjacent to your main streets, your main redevelopment areas. So part of our challenge in moving forward is to take this transportation plan, take all these elements of transit that are so important to link this community, and start to look at how that station uplift can be balanced with the transportation design. So when we start to overlay just a series of quick colors, you can really start to see the areas that are constrained for redevelopment. So the orange area currently is how the transportation plan is allowing development to happen. So you can see that it's highly constrained in the areas where you really want the most development. And the area we're left over with for potential redevelopment is tucked into the south of the property, directly adjacent to single-family residential. All of those issues of transitions are coming up. So as we move forward, our process in working with the transportation authorities, in working with the TTC, which is the Toronto Transit Commission, Metrolinx, and stakeholders, is defining how that can be reorganized in such a way that it allows for redevelopment along the most important catalyst routes. So again, at our disposal, we're very lucky to be working with Metrolinx and with TTC, and we have a huge amount of stakeholder experience in dealing with this. And in terms of moving our process forward, the most important thing is making sure that we have a collaborative process. We have a lot of streams of communication that are happening at the same time, so making sure that those are tied together, they're cohesive, and it's really a cohesive approach moving forward so that everybody's on the same page is important. We haven't been to the public yet as part of this process, and again, determining the ultimate vision and character of buildings will be with them. So a lot of that is missing from this presentation. And then I think something that we focus on is not being overly prescriptive, to allow development to happen, to allow it to evolve, and allow good design to flourish. And that's really the focus of our work as part of this study. So I'm going to hand it over to David.
Thanks, Jessica. So what I'm going to be talking about today is more actually government's role in terms of transportation planning. And specifically, I see that government has a goal in these types of transit infrastructure, and that's to build soft infrastructure. And by soft infrastructure, I mean infrastructure that is both empathetic and thoughtful to the communities that that it will be built within, and not divisive. As you could see within Jessica's previous presentation, there were a few different corridors that really disconnect the community. We're trying to tie that fabric back together. But first, just to give a little bit of context, I work with Metrolinx, and Metrolinx is the regional transportation authority and planner for the greater Toronto and Hamilton area. So we look at transit planning for 9 different local agencies, including the Toronto Transit Commission is one of them. Plus, we also operate a regional transit authority. And Kevin, I was interested when I was listening to your presentation because we actually have the highest return on fare revenue of any transit operator in North America, and we take back 84% of all of our revenues recovered through the fare box. And then in addition to that, I also am working on the Air Rail Link, which is connecting. It'll be built by 2015, and it's connecting Union Station in downtown Toronto to Pearson Airport, and our goal is to have 100% fare recoverability on that line, so which isn't normal, and which is also going to probably result in a fairly high price point for the ticket, but it's something that we've been asked to do by the government. So how I'll explain the role of government within these plans is I'll walk you through Weston Station area master plan that we've been working on. And first off, this just shows, this is an image of Weston. It's a priority neighborhood within the city of Toronto. It's an area in need. There's a high crime rate. A lot of newcomers are coming to the area. They're in need of support. It's a disconnected area, low income, and it suffers from issues of real and perceived crime. In addition to that, too, I think it has a bit of broken windows syndrome. The public realm is disconnected. There's not a lot of outdoor meeting and gathering places, and the retail on the strip, there's a general feeling that it's in decline. This here just shows you an idea of the property values, average property values within the city of Toronto, and then the average property values within Weston. And to put that in some perspective, I think right now within the city of Toronto proper, there's 180 high-rise buildings under development. Weston, I think, has had maybe one development application over the last 10 years or so. In terms of the role of government, it is part of an ongoing conversation. And I would say the first thing that we want to do is we want to set a clear and consistent vision for the project within our terms of reference. And we want to keep things that are more, I think, performance-based, and then let the firms that we work with sort of define how we can realize that vision. It's really important to bring in just a wide variety of stakeholders. Metrolinx, we're providing the funding for a lot of these lines, but we don't have the authority over the types of development that we'd like to see. So we have to work, obviously, very closely with the municipalities and the local transit agencies. And then as part of the stakeholders, obviously, there's the community. And on the Air Rail Link, of which the Weston Station is a station along that line, it's a somewhat controversial project. It's going through a corridor that a lot of properties, their backyards abut right onto it, and there'll be service every 15 minutes. So there's been a little bit of NIMBYism associated with the project. So what we've done is we've set up a community office, and it keeps people informed of construction during the project. It provides a face to the project. And then in addition to it as well, too, we go to the community with regular construction updates every couple of months. And then for the Weston Station Master Plan, we've gone through a huge public consultation process where we started out last May with a large design charrette. And then following that, we met with the Urban Land Institute, and we conducted a technical advisory panel where the original ideas that came from the design charrette, they provided input into what are the economic realities of actually building this stuff. And then we've gone back a number of times saying this is what we've heard from the community, this is what we're building in terms of working through this design and receiving more input from them. So again, it's very important to establish principles. The principles that we established early on with the community were that they wanted it to be community supportive, transit supportive, connected within the community, flexible so that what we build now doesn't preclude future development, and obviously functional in terms of meeting all of the engineering and transit requirements. I think a really important factor, too, of the government's role, and this is something that we've been working closely with Anne and Jessica on some of our projects, is making sure that what is planned is also implemented, because I think that tends to be, I'm both an engineer and a planner, but I think there's a bit of a schizophrenic conversation probably happening within myself. It tends to be a bit of a battle between vampires and werewolves, where one person wants to build something, one person says, no, you can't build that. So we retain the firms to review the drawings as the detailed drawings are being made and provide input to make sure that the integrity of the original design is met. And now I'll just walk you quickly, because I'm cognizant of the time, just through a few of the high-level design principles that we also developed for the site. So if I can go back one, two. This shows the site right here. This shows a site. Metrolinx owns a few acres of property within this area, and the city is looking at this as a catalyst for revitalizing the neighborhood. And as we own land, we've been in discussions with local YMCA, local college, as well as private developers to see what is the sort of interest that we can attract to the site, and will transit bring about that interest. And in terms of the principles of the development that we'd like to see built, first is that it should be mid-rise development, and the new uses should complement the existing street character. It's an old neighborhood. Some of the houses date back to the 1800s. As well, too, I think Anne kind of touched on this earlier in the presentation, but it'll be consistent with the mid-rise and avenue study that the City of Toronto has adopted. Second is to locate higher density, high-rise development along the rail corridor, help with shadowing, and the floor plates of the taller buildings are to have are to be no wider than 750 square meters or 7,500 square feet. One of the benefits that we've said we would build for the community is a station plaza around the station. So that's going to be up there for 2015 with development coming afterwards around it. And so we want to make sure that the development that is at street level along the station plaza animates that space, that it's transparent, and that over time retail will take over that space, and we're planning for live-work units there as well. Four, just important to define the pedestrian cycling connections early on, so that what we build in the initial station survives as new development comes in and builds on top of surface parking. So we've set a guideline of a minimum 7-meter wide pedestrian cycling connection podium or connection, and then also that the design of the station needs to support the long-term station requirements as well too. So the street and block pattern that is set for development will work for that development, but also works for our needs in terms of passenger pickup drop-offs, kiss and ride, and access to parking. So this here just shows the preferred concept that we're working on right now. And the next slide, when we entered this project, there was a feeling in the community that if we brought transit investment, this would result in attracting private development and the community thriving. Through the process, we've discovered that a lot more than that is needed. So yes, the transit investment is very important, but that alone isn't going to achieve the results that we're looking for. So we need to bring in community and neighborhood improvements as well too, in terms of social, economic, and visual improvements. That will then bring the people, and when you have the people, the private development will follow. So, and I think that's it. Thank you.